Give us some of the highlights of like the pivotal moments in your life, and then we can dive into like life-changing moments that have kind of changed the trajectory.
I lost all my money in the process and millions of dollars. And I said, I'm going to spend the next 10 years being a dad and a mom. And so how can I do that and make enough money to pay the bills? And so I decided I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to take all that experience helping people move forward professionally, and I'm going to get my laptop and my cell phone, and I'm going to not miss a baseball practice or a volleyball game or a teacher's meeting or a doctor's appointment. And I just dove in. I made enough to live an okay life, but I didn't miss anything.
I'm just curious what you think about, how we got here as a society.
I think we got here very simply because in the 1960s, late 1960s, when I was just a child, and then through the 70s and into the 80s, feminism came upon us and civil rights came upon us. And there were a lot of macro things that were happening. And I said it to you guys earlier. We said women deserve the same rights as men.
I think the next thing on religion is going to be an AI God, and that people are going to be like, it's all knowing and it's telling us, and it's custom. The messaging is customized to us. I think people that are displaced and they're confused and they haven't found Jesus, I think that's where those people are going to end up. Are you looking for actionable insights from the world's most inspiring individuals? The Built by Love podcast is on a mission to transform your life, your business, and your health. Tune in for impactful conversations with people who do business differently. Avoid burnout, acquire freedom, and live life fully on your own terms. With me, your host, Daniel Bushes, alongside my co-host, Richard Varga.
Welcome to the Built by Love podcast. We are here with Mark Aylward, and he has lived a life, and we're going to have a chance to get into it and talk about some of the tools he's developed along the way, find out ways that I'm sure a lot of us will take away from it, especially the men out there. They've been demonized as of late, and Mark's here to save us. So let's get into it.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's my pleasure. And just as an aside, we've got some serious pollen down here. So if I'm a little puffy or scratchy, I normally look a little bit shinier than this, but it's been a brutal couple of days.
Are you in Texas?
Orlando, Florida.
Okay. All right. I was going to say it has to be Florida or Texas.
Yeah, it's Florida.
Right before the podcast started, we were talking and I was joking saying I should have recorded it. And we were talking about your journey and your accomplishments and your struggles, which we'll dive into all those in the podcast. But you kind of started off saying, I think this is what God wants me to do. I was always the captain of the team. Can you kind of rephrase that for our listener that missed out?
Yeah, I'll paraphrase it. I don't remember it word for word, but I was a leader on my little league team when I was 6. And I tell a story that my dad, he didn't think that I understood that responsibility. And I'm like, of course I don't, I'm 6. But he said, we're going to do something. He took me home from practice and he said, the next day you're going to wear one of my big white t-shirts to practice. And I'm like, okay. And I went to practice and I had this white t-shirt on. And the next day I came back to practice and everyone else on the team was wearing his father's white t-shirt. And my father said, that's what it means to be a leader. And I said, well, again, Dad, I'm 6. I kind of understand what you're talking about, but hopefully it'll make more sense as I get older. And then every time I touched any athletic endeavor, I was the captain of the team. And I started my own company because I couldn't fathom working for someone else after I learned, in my mind, enough stuff to do it on my own. Friends of mine joke with me that they said, if you were in the military, Mark, you would have done quite a few push-ups. And I was not exactly the best with authority figures, particularly ones that I couldn't respect or look up to and from an intellect standpoint or whatever. So yeah, it's kind of been a solid thread. And when I told you guys I went back to my faith after kind of things settled down after the divorce, that was when I started talking to God again, like really close and personal. And I really do believe this is what he wants me to be doing, helping other men that are struggling with divorce, because with divorce comes a lot of other stuff, financial hardship, physical challenges, mental challenges. It doesn't isolate us. It kind of overwhelms us.
Yeah. And one of the things that intrigued me when we were looking at you as a guest is so many men struggle silently and on their own. And it doesn't matter if you've had a friend for 30 years or a friend for 3 years. Men talk about men things. They don't get into like, well, how are you doing? Like, are you okay? How you feeling? They don't talk about those things. They talk about sports. They talk about going to the bar and grabbing a beer or playing some golf or whatever. They don't get into, how are you doing? And so I think a lot of men, especially entrepreneurs, struggle. And whether it's something like a divorce or something like you're losing your business partner or you're having issues in your marriage, or you're sacrificing relationships in your family for building your business, or it's even like you're looking to sell your business. The thing that interested me is you've gone through all of those stages and you've come out a stronger, better man, I'd argue. And I think that's where the value for our listener is. Wherever they are in their own personal journey, likely they're having trials and tribulations and struggles with maintaining either who they are or trying to figure out who they need to be because of external factors in business life, health, and other things.
Yeah, it's all solid observations. I think that there's some threads to what I do, and one of the things I do or try to do is bring humility to the conversation. And I think that when you're successful and confident and masculine, and people are telling you how wonderful you are, and that can get to your head, right? So it gets to all of our heads, right? But then you get like knocked down, get the shit kicked out of you, which I think everybody should have done to them, right? Preferably with minimal damage. But the humility, among other things, that brings makes my, I won't speak for other men, but it makes my ability to be vulnerable with other guys, to build trust very quickly, to be non-judgmental. Like, I won't judge anyone. And, I'll judge the person in front of me at the grocery store for putting toxic stuff into their thing, but I won't open my mouth and tell them, right? I'll just judge them, and then I'll have a laugh about it later. But I don't judge. And I not that I wasn't humble, not that I was judgmental, but as far as like other things like listening skills, two of my kids are girls and now they're women, and they're very strong, very bright, very feminine, very athletic, very capable and competent. And we did that on purpose. They taught me how to listen. They taught me how to shut up. They taught me how to just be quiet. And the humility and the empathetic listening skills, if someone were to say, what's your unique play, Mark? It would be right there. And I think that because I also consider myself masculine, I'm 6'4", 230 pounds. I can walk into a room and people look at me. And so that comes with responsibility too, right? So, but that combination, I think, is very unique. I haven't bumped into it yet. And so, yeah, I would rather not have had to go through everything I went through in order to get where I am now. But, I find there's two choices every day. You give up or you keep going. And giving up never appealed to me. It was never an option. And, when people would say to me, how do you do it all? Your mom, your dad, you're running a business, you're doing this, you're doing that. Like, I don't know, man, you just do what you got to do. I mean, God gives you as much as you can handle. And maybe I had the ability to handle a little more than the next guy. I don't know. I don't profess to have all the answers.
It's kind of funny you mentioned that too about sort of your faith and God, because in a way they say you don't get a challenge that God doesn't think you can handle.
Mm-hmm.
And in a way you're kind of born for this, literally, in the sense that you're 6'4", you have an opposing figure, you've had leadership, you've been athletic, you've been sort of this alpha in the world. And then you've just been handed, a ton of bricks thrown on top of you.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's, in a way, it's easier for people to sort of like, they can kind of buy into it because they're like, man, this guy really took it in the shorts, and
Mm-hmm.
you wouldn't think he would have even got shortchanged like that. And so for him to have taken on a lot in his life, and then made this pathway out and sort of blazed out of it. It really, I think, is empowering for a lot of people in ways that I think, an old school way of looking at it, if someone wasn't maybe as equipped, they might just be like, yeah, that guy's kind of a puss anyway. It was something was going to come his way, In this way, you're like, hey, listen, this life is going to hit the best and brightest in all kinds of ways that we don't anticipate, and it's all about the next chapter.
Yeah, yeah, no, it's valid. I think, I was one of the reasons I started my book, I've been thinking about it for years, is that I was handed this video by my podcast co-host, Jim, and I watched it. It was about a minute and 30 seconds. I can't remember the guy's name, but he was on the Chris Williamson podcast. And Chris Williamson is a pretty big name in the podcast world. If you will look him up, you'll find he's a British guy, young man, very talented. But this guy was, I think, Canadian or French, and he was talking about the best men are those that have been knocked down and gotten back up. And he talked about the humility, and he talked about the gratitude, and he talked about the optimism and the self-accountability and the personal responsibility. And when you recover from something, sometimes you're stronger than you were before. When I was listening to him, I thought, well, that's me. I got knocked down and I didn't break. Like, I almost broke a few times, but I didn't break. And I feel better. I feel more humble. Like I said before, I feel more non-judgmental. I feel very grateful because what I do have is 3 outstanding relationships with my children that never broke. They never severed. They never, they were confused for a long time. And I just kept telling them, you address us, your mother and father, the way you address everyone, your teachers, your coaches, your friends. Listen to what they say and watch what they do. And when those two things are the same, that's where you find integrity. And when those two things are different, that's where you have to question the level of integrity of whomever it might be, myself included. And so I just never backed down off of what I stood for because it was going to be easier in the moment, because when you're going through this kind of stuff, you need a break. You need to breathe every once in a while. And when you have to discipline and be consistent and show up every day, it's like, again, can I take Tuesday off? Jesus. So and I wanted to maintain my sense of humor. I like making people laugh. I like laughing. I think it's healthy. And no one was going to take that away from me.
Can you just quickly, and we probably should have done this at the beginning, but for our listener that's wondering, okay, this man's obviously had a lot of struggles, which we're going to get into, and obviously triumphs. That's why you're here. But can you give us a quick background? What have you done professionally as an entrepreneur? Just give us some of the highlights of the pivotal moments in your life, and then we can dive into life-changing moments that have kind of changed the trajectory.
Yeah. So, I had a real nice childhood. I played a lot of sports. My mother and father were pretty happy for a long time. They got divorced when I was in my 30s, which wasn't really impactful for me at all. I kind of was at that point wondering why they were still together because they weren't talking. And that's a whole nother set. Then I got accepted late admission into the University of Notre Dame, which was kind of a big deal because I'm Irish Catholic, and I didn't appreciate it as much as I probably should have at the time because I was 17 and I was an idiot, right? But that was a really good move, and I grant my father credit for that because he coaxed me into that. And I grew up in Boston, and I didn't want anything to do with Ivy League schools. I was just sick of the whole snobbery and elitism. I just couldn't stand it. So I looked at Stanford and Duke and Notre Dame because I was a good student, and I got into Notre Dame. And I would never get in today. I laugh about that. But that was a big deal. And that put me in Chicago after graduation, where I met one of my best friends. And I started in the insurance business with Metropolitan Life Insurance Agency, and I couldn't stand it. But I thought that's what you're supposed to do. Go get a job with a big company and make a little money, move to a big city and have some fun. And so Chicago was a wonderful place. I don't know if it still is. I hope it still is, but I had a great time there. And then I moved back to Boston, and fast forward, I got my ex-wife, who was my girlfriend at the time, pregnant. And so I had to take this kind of meandering 20-something life and go, time to step up, dude, time to be a dad. So nothing else matters. And everything shifted. I gave everything to the energy of making sure I was going to be able to take care of my family like really well. So I started looking around because I didn't know what I wanted to do. And this guy came to my parents' condo. My mother's best friend had remarried this Australian guy, and I asked him what he did. I said, I know I'm not supposed to ask people what they do for a living, but I need to ask because I'm searching, and you seem like you got your shit together, and I'd really love your opinion. And he said, I'm a recruiter for petrochemical engineers in Saudi Arabia for Saudi Arabian oil companies. And I'm like, well, you're going to have to unpack that one for me. I don't even know what that means, you know? And I said, I thought companies found their own people. And he goes, no, particularly with specific skills like engineering and medical. And they go outside to agencies called recruiters. And I said, well, how does it work? And he explained it to me. And then I said, well, may I ask how you get paid? And he said, I get a contingency fee. I get a percentage of the first year's starting salary. And I said, well, what are the percentages and what are the starting salaries? And he said 25% and $300,000. And I said, well, I just found out what I'm going to do for a living. And so I opened up the newspaper. That's how long ago it was. And I went on an interview on Monday, and they hired me on the spot and sat me next to the guy that was going to be my future business partner. And I cut my teeth on recruiting for 3 years. And then in the midst of all the personal challenges, I made a decision. I want to leave Boston because everyone and his brother wants to tell me what I should do with the rest of my life. And I'm sick of it. I want to go start my own life with my new wife and my new child, free from everyone's opinion. And I think that was a good idea. Even now, I think it was a good idea. Although I didn't get the babysitters, and I didn't go to high school with my carpenter or my plumber. So I didn't get the benefit of any of that stuff, but I was free and I got to make my own decisions to do whatever I wanted. And that was really helpful because it was quite a burden to get your father's opinion, your mother's opinion, your uncle's opinion, your brother's opinion, your friend's opinion. You know, she did it on purpose. I was like, whatever. Like, I got a responsibility here. I'm getting out of here. And that's when I met my mentor. And I worked for him for, I guess, 4 years. We still keep in touch. And when he sold the company, he asked me to come start a company with him and said, you'll do all the work. I'll teach you how to do all the work, and I will fund the whole thing, and I'll pay you handsomely. And I'll give you a percentage of the sale price when we get rid of this thing in a couple of years. I got 3 MBAs and a PhD in how to start a recruiting business in the service space. And he paid me 6 figures while I was learning, you know? So it was really, I talk about mentorship all the time. I think it's the most forgotten, misunderstood thing that people just, I think every young person should seek out a mentor, like put more energy into that than anything. So then I started this company. And when he sold the company, I got a decent check, and I built a $1 million home in Winter Park, Florida, and ended up with 3 children, 2 girls and a boy. And I think it was about my 40th birthday that I started thinking to myself, I don't think this is going to last. I don't think I can take this shit anymore. And so it was a long time ago. And so I decided to file for divorce a couple of years after that. I think it was 2003. And then the world exploded. That evening, the police came to the house and escorted me out of the house under the guise of a domestic violence injunction that had been authored the same day in response to the divorce papers. I beat the dog. I abused my kids. I owned a gun. I was a drug addict and an alcoholic. I was a dangerous guy. All bullshit, you know. And she did that 3 times over 10 years and didn't get in trouble for any of them. So I kind of started to understand that I'm in a war here, and I didn't see it coming, you know, because I don't think like that. I'm not a criminal. I'm not a liar. And when you don't act like that, I did anyway, I have a difficult time understanding that anyone actually could, you know, it's like beyond my reach. And so then I sold the company under duress because she was interfering with my customers and my employees, and she had no qualms about embarrassing herself. So under duress. And then I decided, well, I lost all my money in the process, and millions of dollars. And I said, I'm going to spend the next 10 years being a dad and a mom. And so how can I do that and make enough money to pay the bills? And so I decided I'm going to be a coach. I'm going to take all that experience helping people move forward professionally, and I'm going to get my laptop and my cell phone, and I'm going to not miss a baseball practice or a volleyball game or a teacher's meeting or a doctor's appointment. And I just dove in, and I made enough to live an okay life, but I didn't miss anything. And you guys made the point earlier that a lot of guys miss stuff. The irony of this is this brutality that was thrust upon me also put me in a position where I have spectacular memories of my children individually and all together traveling around the country playing volleyball with my girls for 7 years because they were both really good. And we won state championships and national championships, and it was a blast. And and then the last few years, I've tried to take that and put some structure around it and some frameworks around it, niche down to specifically men who are going through divorce because there aren't any resources for those kind of guys. And so, long story short, I'm sure I left some gaps there, but that's a reasonable history, I suppose, of where I came from.
You didn't start your business to be a full-time marketer. You started it to take control of your future and live life on your own terms, to earn abundantly, and to make a positive impact in this world. But somewhere along the way, funnels, lead magnets, landing pages, and email sequences became your second job. At Built by Love Agency, we get it, and we've got you. We specialize in done-for-you marketing that speaks your brand, sells your services, and brings in your dream clients without you lifting a finger. Whether you're ready to scale or just tired of duct taping your marketing together, it's time to hand it over to the pros. We've been in business since 1998 and have worked with over 1,000 brands, ranging from Fortune 500 companies to small businesses with visions to change the world. Our experience in what we do runs deep, and our multiple awards, accolades, and decades of happy clients shows what we do for our clients works. Visit BuiltByLove.com today to schedule your discovery call so you can get back to doing the work you love. An agency you'll love, results you'll love even more. BuiltByLove.com.
Yeah. I think we were talking about this. Most men, I think it's just the way they're designed. They go through the battles in their life silently. How did you find a way to kind of break through that? So I know that you're out there coaching men that are going through tough times, but how do you get them to open up?
You know, it is one of the challenges, but I think that what I alluded to before, I think when you lead with vulnerability and you're also not playing the victim, like that's terrible. The victim thing is terrible. So when you lead with personal accountability, my happiness is up to me. And then you lead with vulnerability. Let me share some, like I was talking to a guy the other day and he was horrified about what he was going through. And I said, one of the things I said to him was, I said, I want to remind you of one thing, James, and that is your children are a lot stronger than you think they are. They'll be fine. He just started bawling, he just started crying his eyes out and just said, dude, no embarrassment, no judgment. I was so worried about that for so long that this is going to fuck them up, right? And it didn't. It threatened to, and I did a pretty good job of being consistent and disciplined, and I gave them routines and structure. But that was such a concern, and I'm sure it's a concern of any father that's going through a divorce, that I'm going to lose them or they're going to get lost. Vulnerability it makes people trust me quickly. And I think it also, the way I did my job was, recruiting business is a very transactional business. People talk about resumes and interviews and salary negotiations. And I tell people to this day, I don't care what you do. I want to know who you are, right? That's how I can do my job. And I was always so invested in building relationships that, you have to ask people how much money they make. You have to ask people what they do. Do they discuss these things with their wives? Or you get personal, because it's what drives their behavior. And if you don't know what drives their behavior, then you can't really help them, right? So I think it was the way I did my job, the way I was raised, and my lack of hesitancy to be vulnerable so that I can meet them. I beat them to that. I get there first. And I think it makes a lot of guys go, hey, what do I have to lose? This guy sounds pretty cool,
I want to circle back on something, because I think we are in a dangerous time in this world, which is I think for a long time, thousands of years, we valued strong men. And I lately there's been this whole thing about toxic masculinity, and I understand anything unchecked can be bad. But I also understand that it takes both of us to get through this, and we need strong men. And there's that old saying too, right, about weak men and strong men, and good times and bad times. And so I'm just curious what you think about, how we got here as a society. And I think there's been a little bit of pushback on this. I think we kind of pendulum really swung one way. And I think now people are kind of in the afterglow of a lot of damage. I think people are now kind of like, no, we need strong men. We need strong dads. We need strong authority figures. We need people that are going to be masculine, and there shouldn't be anything wrong with saying that. But I'm
Yeah.
just curious what you think about that and where we are and how we got there.
Yeah, well, it's one of my favorite topics. And I have these two young ladies that went off to liberal arts school and came back with a different worldview. And we still get along fabulously. And I tell them, and we just don't disagree on much, but there's a couple of like feminism and abortion and racial injustice and immigration. Those are all like, they're challenging topics, but they know exactly how I feel. I'm an American, I'm a dad, I'm a responsible male, and I've accomplished some things and I've made some mistakes. How we got here, like during COVID, I wore a mask once, and that was so I could watch my grandson play basketball. And the two guys that were reffing the game weren't wearing masks. So it's like, come on. So I've been accused of being arrogant. I've been accused of being stubborn. I've been accused of a few things, but I don't get emotional very easily in terms of anger or raising my voice or whatever. And my girls have really taught me a lot about, you can do a lot more with pausing and being quiet than you can with talking. And so I think we got here very simply because in the 1960s, late 1960s, when I was just a child, and then through the 70s and into the 80s, feminism came upon us and civil rights came upon us. And there were a lot of macro things that were happening. And I said it to you guys earlier. We said women deserve the same rights as men. And I don't know too many people that would argue that. And the ones that I know that would argue it are usually stand-up comedians, and they're just making fun of it, right? Everyone believes we should all, as humans, have the same rights. And but we talked to the women about what that was going to mean. They stopped wearing bras and they started going to work and going to all the things that those are wonderful things in a vacuum. But no one stepped up and said, oh, by the way, men, this is what's going to happen to you, right? And this is what you need to be prepared for. And here are some of the conversation topics that you need to be ready to have. No one gave us that information. And everybody just made a bunch of assumptions. And then it just got out of control. The concept that we actually were talking for years about what a man was and what a woman was is insane to me, But when I started looking into this stuff and thinking about writing a book, I asked myself, Rich, the same question. How did this happen? And I started doing research. And if you guys aren't familiar with what some people refer to as the Harvard study of men, it goes by other names, but somebody at Harvard University in Cambridge, Massachusetts, where I'm from, right next door, Winchester, Massachusetts, started interviewing men about their own happiness. And so I think it was 1933 or 1935. So we got 100 years of data because that guy passed it on to the next guy who passed, and it was a professor in the psychology department or somebody who was relatively qualified to gather this kind of data. But when they first started asking men, it was all elite white men because that's who was going to Harvard at the time in the 30s. But now, 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, now you have multicultural, you have Chinese people, you have Black people, you have British people, you have men, you have women, and you also now have people's entire lives all the way to their deathbeds. And there's grandkids and nephews and nieces and wives. So you have all this. The data is, I would put it up against any data of any sample of any kind just because of the breadth and depth of it and how long a period of time it happened. And they came back to the same conclusion every time. The number one cause for men's happiness is the number and the depth of their personal relationships every single time. And so I thought to myself, well, that's fascinating. So I'm going to write this book, and it's going to be, this is what's going on. This is how I believe it happened. Here are 15 world-renowned psychologists and other people that have voiced opinions about men's happiness and what men need and what they don't get, all including people like Jordan Peterson and Gabor Mate and guys that are like really done some aggressive work in this place for a long, long time. So that's how I think it started. And I think that there's too many guys. We kind of did this to ourselves because too many guys didn't stand up and say, you know what? If you don't want me to open the door for you, that's fine. Go fuck yourself. I'm going to open the door for the next person, and you can take offense to that if you want, you know? Now, I didn't say that to people. I just smiled at them, but I'm like, I'm not changing my behavior because you want me to say a certain thing? No, it's his and hers. It's she, it's he, you know? And I used to I would take opportunities to go to events where I was given the opportunity to debate people at the local library or the Knights of Columbus or whatever. And I was always one of the most conservative people in the room, but I almost always had somebody come up to me afterwards and say, I've never spoken to such a conservative man who spoke with such kindness and was so non-judgmental. And I just kind of kept getting that. And I just kept thinking to myself, well, that's where the power is. Don't judge people. Don't accuse people. Don't try and win arguments. Investigate things. Ask questions. Be quiet and listen. And the Kennedy guy from Louisiana who's in Congress or the Senate, he's hilarious. He's a really funny guy. He's like, let's just keep promoting this policy called let them talk. So, yeah, that's my take on it.
He's good for some quips all the time, Kennedy.
He's funny. He's a funny
It's
guy.
funny. My son's 7, and this was like 2 years ago. And I said to my wife, I said, so he's getting to the age that I'm going to teach him how to ice skate, and we're going to put him in ice hockey. And she's like, ice hockey? Hold on. No. He can like do soccer or something. I'm like, yeah, he can do soccer and ice hockey. Mm-hmm. She's like, I don't know. No, absolutely not. Those guys like fight. They're like hitting each other. And I said, yeah, exactly. That's why he's going into ice hockey. I came from a poor divorced mom. I was only able to play 2 years of ice hockey, and I played from like 14 to 16 years old. And that was it. That was my run. And it taught me more of being a man and playing that sport for 2 years than anything else. And I was like, we're gonna teach him at a young age. She's like, well, why do you want him in a violent sport? You know? And I said, because we need to build a man. And I said, I understand that, it's our son and I love him. I don't want anything to happen to him. But I'm looking at this as I need to raise a man, and he needs to be tough. And he needs to understand there's consequences to everything you do in life. And if that puck goes in the corner, you have to go in the corner. And there might be a bigger guy or two guys in the corner, but you have to go in the corner. No one else is going to do that. And you have to get yourself out of this situation. And you're going to likely get knocked down. And things are going to be hard. But you know what? You're going to get back up. You're not going to complain. You're going to go after it again. And eventually, you're going to learn that you're going to be able to succeed. And there's teamwork and there's other things. But you're going to learn to be tough. And needless to say, he did get into ice hockey, and she's all for it now.
Yeah.
But I think that, and I agree with what you gentlemen are talking about, is somewhere along the way, we forgot that we need to raise tough men. And there's a lot of, 20-somethings out there that never knew the consequence of if you run your mouth, that someone's going to hit you.
It's so true.
I refer to it as the playground. I mean, the world is a playground, and that's the way the world works. And there are bullies on the playground, and there is competition on the playground, and you're going to fall down, and you're going to get back up, and you're going to get your knees scraped, and you're going to bump your head. Life is hard, man. And, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about to me seems to be, we have a percentage of the population a foolish percentage of the population that seems to want to deny what I call human nature. And we've all alluded to it, right? Men do these things. There's a reason that they do these things, because we used to have, and go back to the caves, right? We used to fight, we used to kill animals for food, and we would walk out in the morning and come back, and maybe we wouldn't come back one day, and they'd have to take care of themselves. But then the meal was prepared by the woman, and the woman took care of the kids. I'm not like saying we should go back to the cavemen days, but to deny the fact that we are inclined to want to do these things, it's why men have the jobs that they have. I spent 30 years helping software engineers find work. And the STEM argument, we need more women in STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math. And it's like, yeah, you can go ahead and talk about that all you want. They don't want to do that shit, right? Very few women want to do that stuff. They want to be nurses, they want to be teachers, they want to be moms. And the women that I know that are in their 30s and 40s and don't have a guy or a family yet, they're starting to regret it. They're starting to question whether they made the right decision or not. And I would get my head cut off if I said that in front of certain women. But I'm sorry, can you argue that that's not true? I don't think you can. You can emote around it. You can yell about it. You can walk away from a conversation or raise your voice. But you can't stop and say, I'll give you a couple of examples of what I mean. It can be done. Well, I think those are outliers. And I think when we challenge human nature, we get in trouble. I don't know why we want to keep doing that.
What mistakes do you see? Obviously, you've built businesses, you've sold businesses, you've worked with recruiting, you've seen successful people, you're a successful man, you're consulting with successful men that are going through troubling times. Is there a pattern or a trait that you're noticing that these men have made mistakes along their way, whether it's abandoning friendships or health, or relationships in their family, or whatever?
Yeah, well, we've talked about quite a few of them. It makes me think about a story I heard. This guy was a senior executive at Hewlett Packard. This is 25 years ago. And we were in a meeting. It was a sales meeting, and he eventually purchased from me, gave me a retainer, and it worked out real well. But we got to talking. He was a father. I think his son was in middle school or maybe high school. And he said he was at a lacrosse game just the other day, and his phone rang, and he turned around and faced away from the field to answer a phone call that he didn't need to answer. And he got caught up in the call, and he turned around, and one of his buddies said something like, "Did you see that?" The guy's like, "What?" He goes, "Your kid just scored this amazing goal." And he said, "That was the day I said, I will never bring my phone to any of my children's events ever again, and I'm never going to let that happen again." I think that's a guy who was given the opportunity to learn with a limited amount of pain, and he paid attention. He took the lesson, right? I think a lot of times we don't pay enough attention to the lessons that are going on around us. We're being told certain things. Like I tell young fathers, anytime I see one with kids, I say something like, take a lot of pictures, dude, because that guy's going to be 18 tomorrow, And I try to remind people, one of my favorite phrases, we need to be reminded way more than we need to be taught new things, right? Is just add some context. But the other thing I've discovered as a coach, and my daughter is a health coach as well, she talks about this too, is you can't help somebody until they're ready to be helped. You just can't. It's kind of like if you have any addiction in your family or your friendship circles, that the only time that guy's going to stop hitting the bottle or shooting up or whatever is when he decides, I've had enough of this. And most of them don't, So yeah, the threads are common. Paying attention is a big theme for me, particularly as we become more disconnected with AI and social media. It's like, put your phone down. I tell this friend of mine when we go to lunch periodically, I said, if you're going to pick up your phone while we're eating lunch, I'm just going to get this shit to go and I'm out of here because I didn't come here to listen to you talk on the phone, And, sometimes you have to be that kind of harsh. It's this one thing. Another one of my pet phrases is, I'm not nice to people because nice is kissing someone's ass and telling them what they want to hear. I'm kind to people, which is telling them what they need to hear and doing it with some humility and kindness and respect because that's helpful. That's why I like Jordan Peterson so much. He lives like that. So anyway, I don't know if I directly answered your question, Daniel. I hope I got some of it.
No, you did. And I love that. I love that because I think we need more of that out there.
I had a question on, so I work in whiskey often, and there's kind of like some throwbacks because and it's not to advocate for drinking, yes or no. All I'm saying, there's a social aspect to just getting together and having a combo over a dram, over a glass, whatever it is. It could be milk. But I'm curious what you think about the old fashioned clubs or dens or meeting spaces. I feel like we've kind of lost that. It almost seems like an antiquated thing, the Elks Club or whatever that used to be out there in mid-century. And I feel like people would think that we're more connected than ever because we're on social media, but I don't think we are. I feel like it's just top level broadcasting, always 24/7, little memes and clips and whatever to kind of make contact, but I don't feel like we get together enough. Do you think there's any value then in those clubs sort of returning and giving men or women or whoever that is just a chance to connect, find some shared things, and have a conversation about things that matter?
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that it's interesting. I've been dating a woman now for about 7 years, and lovely, lovely woman. She's much more of a social animal than I am. So she's always trying to get me to go to places where people are gathering. And I really try to say yes, even though I don't want to. And she introduced me to what she calls the 20-minute rule. She's like, anywhere we go, whether you want to go or I want to go, we get there and one of us doesn't like it in 20 minutes, we leave. And I got to tell you guys, the pressure that took off me was palatable. And so pretty much I'll say yes to almost everything now because I know I can get out of there in 20 minutes and I hardly ever want to leave, right? It's just me. It's one of my flaws. But I've been telling a lot of people for a long time, I think human connection, like direct human contact is the next biggest thing in the business world, in the world in general. It's exactly because of what you're talking about, Rich. I think we're starving for human connection. And, the first time I heard somebody was in a relationship with their AI agent, I thought, I want to vomit. That is wrong, man. And I was looking into the Knights of Columbus actually just in the last couple of days because it's Lent now and I'm eating fish on Fridays and they have fish fries at the churches. And so, we go to these places and the Knights of Columbus, I'm like a spring chicken to these guys. So they're all over me. They want me to join because I'm like, I'm not using a cane yet. I'm still getting around without a wheelchair. So it's like, I'm trying personally to overcome my own social shyness. And it might be difficult for you to understand that I'm socially shy because I don't come off that way on a podcast. But something about being in a room of people that a few minutes go by and I settle right in. And sometimes I'm commanding the room in 10 or 15 minutes, but my reticence is interesting. And I'm working on that. But I think that I have a lot of friends that I just don't talk to as frequently as I used to. My dad's 97 and he drives his own car and doesn't take any medication. So, but I don't know if he's going to wake up tomorrow, because he's 97. So I've been calling him 2 or 3 times a week instead of 2 or 3 times a month recently. And I'm very conscious of what you're just talking about. And so what I'm trying to do is what can I do to facilitate that community, whether I benefit from it or not, right? Can I get people together? Another interesting thing is what I talk about is good for young men. It's good for old men. It's good for middle-aged men. It's good for women. So I'm trying to get more public outings where I can get in front of a podium, even if it's 5 people or 10 people or 100 people and say, let's talk about some of the things that are challenging us today. And let's talk about some of the ways we might be able to overcome those. I have a little bit of experience with that. Maybe there's some stories I can tell that will make you laugh and make you think a little differently about some things. So yeah, I think community I'm trying to de-escalate my automated online delivery and escalate my face-to-face, one-on-one group, human-to-human time. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work out, but I think it's going to resonate. I think people are starving for this.
You don't have a marketing problem. You have a connection problem. In today's crowded, noisy marketplace, your competitors are spending more, shouting louder, and chasing every new trend. But deep down, you know that's not the answer. Because real growth, the kind that lasts, comes from something deeper. It comes from love. Marketing Built by Love reveals the hidden engine behind the world's most successful brands. Genuine human connection. This isn't theory. It's the same science-backed framework used by billion-dollar companies to earn trust, spark loyalty, and turn passive customers into passionate brand advocates. And now, it's available to you. Whether you're a startup founder, solo entrepreneur, or seasoned business leader, if you're tired of superficial strategies that burn out fast and want to build something meaningful, this book is your blueprint. The future of marketing is human connection, not hype. Get your copy of Marketing Built by Love today at Target.com, any Barnes & Noble store, Amazon.com, or wherever you buy quality books. Because love scales, and your brand deserves to grow.
The things that you're bringing up, I've said on previous podcasts that AI, automation, social media is driving people away, and the future of business is not necessarily going to be AI agents. I mean, yes, those are going to exist, and a lot of things are going to change, but events are the future, where you can have real people with similar values coming together in that community format. Because everything that you're seeing online, you're being hit with ads, your data is being stolen, you're being judged, there's trolls, are these accounts fake? People are judging you from afar. There's no humility, there's no kindness, there's no authenticity. Kind of adding to the AI thing, I don't know if this is going to sound crazy or not. I've said this before. I think, and this is a little bit negative. This is the only thing I'll go negative on, is I think that in the future, and I don't know if that's 5 years from now, 50 years from now, 500 years from now, I think the next thing on religion is going to be an AI God, and that people are going to be like, it's all knowing and it's telling us, and it's custom. The messaging is customized to us. I think people that are displaced and they're confused and they haven't found Jesus, I think that's where those people are going to end up. And whether their relationships with AI are going to be at whatever level, I think that's ultimately where it's going to end up.
Yeah, it's an interesting observation. I wouldn't suggest that I know one way or the other whether that prediction will come true. I do. We all know why cults have existed in the past, and there's nothing new about cults. My father, one of his favorite statements, and if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And I think that there's a lot of people that don't stand for anything, and that a lot of them get access to microphones and video cameras, unfortunately. But yeah, I think that's a danger. I just wonder if it's just another permutation on the cult thing, and it makes me think of this, guys, is again, back to my career as an information technology recruiter. I talked to software engineers that were on the cutting edge of technology development every day for 35 years. So even though I never became a technologist, I've seen new technology. When I started recruiting, there was 40 of us in this boiler room. If you ever saw that movie, if you haven't seen it, it's a good movie. That's how I worked for the first 3 or 4 years of my life. And we had one fax machine for 40 people, and it went squeak, squeak, squeak. And there was no internet, there was nothing. And remember the year 2000 where we thought the world was going to come to an end, then nothing happened? That happens all the time. So I have probably seen somewhere between 15 and 20 new technology iterations. Remember MySpace? You remember there's so many examples, and we just forget about them. We don't remember them because they faded away. But I would suggest that far more of them never became anything than became something impactful. I'm not suggesting AI is one of those. I don't see how we can get out of its way. But people have come out and told me they were an expert in something for 35 years. And I'm like, you're full of shit. That technology hasn't even been out long enough for anybody to be an expert. And the word guru getting tossed around, and people love. How many things have you seen on LinkedIn or on social media where I just developed this agent to help people do the full sale life cycle? I even posted this morning. I'm like, I just figured out a way to get people happy in 2 seconds, and it only takes $5, and then I'm going to come back and charge you $1 gazillion. I mean, it was just foolish, and I think people are just like jumping on this bandwagon, and we're not really going to know what it is for another couple of years, because I've seen this over and over and over and over. Like, they're going to get rid of mainframe computers. Mainframe computers still run the railroads and most of the banks in this country, and COBOL applications that were written in the 60s, you know? So, I'm a little skeptical, maybe more so than most, because I've seen this kind of faux software invention, this faux technology, this vaporware is what they call it. Anyway, that's probably one of the things I'm most skeptical about.
It does feel, though, just to push back a bit, it does feel different this time. I feel like there's the last 4,000 years, we've all had something in common with our grandfathers going all the way back. I think the last 5 to 10 years, we're in a we're in a new space, and I think it's your toaster's spying on you. Everyone wants a smart thing. It's all BS. It's all surveillance. There's just the massive amount of data mining that I just don't think the amount of privacy invasions that we've let happen in the last 5 years. And to your point earlier about, when no one said anything and now it's the new normal, and someone made a pretty funny video the other day about, oh, I need your Wi-Fi password to get into the toilet, otherwise the lid won't open. They just went through this whole big thing of like what it's like to live now. I don't know. I know what you're saying, though. I know there's been a lot of that stuff, but this seems like a beast. This seems like an insurmountable.
I couldn't argue with you, Rich. I think there's certainly, I understand that argument, and I support it on many different levels. I think that, one of the things that, a couple of interesting things about AI from a lay person. I'm not an expert by any means, but I use it every day. And when I was started to use it about a year ago, I would say to people, if you're using AI to create content, you're a fraud. And today I would say to you, if you're not using AI for content creation, you're a fool. And so, you got to keep an open mind about important things, because we investigate and we discover new things and we discover more new things. And then I said to everybody, I think the two things that we're doing, that we do with everything, we don't anticipate, if we make this magnanimous change now, like green energy, what's going to happen in 5 years? What's going to happen in 10 years? What's going to happen globally, right? And the thing about AI, the two big things about AI, I don't think it's privacy. I think it's energy and regulation, right? Because I think we have not anticipated the energy output required, because we're talking about putting data centers in space now, and they're building them everywhere, and when's the last time anybody complained about fossil fuels? It's like we need them to run AI. Oh, okay. So now they're important again, nuclear power. We're talking about fission and fusion, I mean, we don't know. I think we can anticipate based on paying attention over a period of time and asking good questions. But the other thing about AI I discovered immediately, and I discovered it on my own, when I started prompting ChatGPT initially, I immediately thought to myself, this is exactly like interviewing a candidate. I have to ask the same deep and broad questions, and I have to continuously ask, what does that mean? Why are you saying that? Why are you making that decision? And I became a contextual prompting expert because I already was one. And I remember that epiphany I had, thinking, oh my gosh, now I understand. And now we're so far beyond prompting, agents and coding and vibe coding and all that other stuff. But Yeah, I had an anxiety attack on my 60th birthday 4 years ago. I've never had anxiety in my life. And I think I was being reminded that I've reached a milestone that I'm going downhill from here, right? I'm not going to like get better at playing tennis, right? I'm going to get worse, right? so, so it's like, I think that was part of it, but it was also that, in my estimation, that allowed all of this noise that we're talking about to just pile on. And one of the things try to help people with, I help myself with, is you got to take big shit on one at a time. You can't put all the world on your shoulders all the time. It's not tenable. It's not possible. And I think that's easier said than done now, because both of you have described having lives as I do, where if I let everything that could get to me at the same time, I'm fucked, you know? So one of the things I try and help people with is, let's just take these things on one at a time. And let's recognize, and this is a true statement for me, 90% of what I've worried about in my life never took place. I worried about it for nothing. And so if you can remind yourself of that when something is getting on you, I find it's very helpful, because it's true, you know?
As we start to wrap up today, I only have a few more questions, and there's the one that's really standing out is because you mentioned God, we've talked about God briefly. How important do you think it is for a man to have a relationship with God?
I think it's crucial. I think that there's so many angles to that, Daniel. I think that the one that's probably most germane to my experience is the example that I have in my own father. He's from a family of 12 children, and he was the guy that took care of everybody. He became a fighter pilot and then an airline pilot, and did really well, and took care of his older brothers and sisters and his younger brothers and sisters. But he was raised in a very Catholic family and has been a very faithful guy. He goes to church every day, drives his own car. He says the rosary a couple times a day. He's read the Bible 100 times, and he's very well versed. And he doesn't proselytize. He doesn't put himself upon other people. He answers questions if people ask him about his faith, but he doesn't initiate conversations about it, because he believes his relationship with God is between he and God. But I've watched this guy be so successful. He has the highest amount of peace of mind of anyone I've ever come in contact with my entire life. His head hits the pillow at 10 o'clock at night, and he wakes up at 6 every day. He's healthy as an ox. He's been extremely materially successful. All of his personal relationships. I mean, when I go home to visit with him and he takes me to mass, he's like a rock star at mass. Like he can't even talk, right? Everyone wants a piece of Jim, you know? So I have an unfair advantage. I have seen what happens when you are consistently paying attention to your faith, and it just works. And the other thing that in my life I've experienced is, when I encounter people with real faith, like genuine faith, they're just happier. They're happier than the people that don't have that. That's been my experience. So I think it's critical. I know we're running out of time, but I want to tell you guys that I went to confession a few years ago, and I hadn't been in 35 years. And so I pulled this priest aside at mass, this little Puerto Rican guy, cool priest, likes talking about football and Star Wars during his homily. And I said, Father, when do you hear confession? I don't even think they call it attrition. They call it something else now. It's not even called confession. I'm embarrassed. I can't remember the name. Reconciliation. There you go. Thank you. The pagan in me speaks. So I said, when do you hear confession? And he looks at me and he smiles. And this guy's like 5'2", and I'm towering over him. It's just an interesting contradiction. He says, how about right now? I said, oh, okay. He goes, follow me. There's a shade tree out back. Let me grab my sash. And he grabs his purple sash and his Bible and his rosary. And he walks out, and we get under this tree. And this guy's going out of his way to make me comfortable. Like, he doesn't want me to be worried about anything. And he even joked. He said, I'm really kind of worried. I don't know what to say. I don't remember how this is supposed to go. And he said, well, Mark, let me tell you this. I've been a priest for almost 50 years. So don't think for a moment you're going to tell me something I haven't already heard. And he said, don't don't be specific about anything. Just think about some of the things that you think maybe you shouldn't have done, and ask God for forgiveness. And then he said something in Latin as he blessed me. And I went to shake his hand, and he pushed my hand aside and said, "We don't do that here. We hug." And he wrapped his arms around me and he gave me a hug. Guys, I lifted off the ground. I floated out of that parking lot, and I started banging the phone. I called my uncle, who's a priest. I called my father. I called my kids. I called my brother. I called my friends. I'm like, you guys got to hear this story. It was unbelievable. And that was probably the most recent time I said, this is real. This is a real thing here, because that's as close as I've ever come to actually talking to God. I thought he was right there with me. It was crazy. So
It reminds me of a joke, if you want to hear
yeah.
it. Guy goes to do a confession with his priest, and he goes, "Okay, I just got to tell you this. I've had sex with 5 different women over the last 5 days." And the priest goes, "Okay, take this lemon, cut it in half, squeeze it directly into your mouth." And he goes, "Will that help me absolve my sins?" And he goes, "No, but it'll take that stupid smile off your face."
That's funny. Yeah, what's something else we need to be better at is making fun of stuff, making fun of everything. I think the stand-up comedians are bringing us back to sanity right now. But
I agree.
yeah, I don't know, Daniel, if you had another one for your final thoughts. I didn't want to cut you off.
No, that's just the final question is, who, if someone's listening and they're inspired, they want to get in touch with you, they want to have a conversation with you, who should do that and how do they find you?
Well, I would say, against all of my marketing training, that I can help anybody who's struggling. The person that I'm really focused on from a marketing standpoint now is the middle-aged man who's bumped up against hardship, very specifically divorce, because I have so much knowledge and unfortunately so much experience in that space. That's probably where I can add the most value. But I've been coaching people up professionally for my entire life. So um, if you've tried something, or to your point, both of your points about guys just not wanting to open up, hopefully somebody that wasn't willing to open up has heard something I've said, and maybe is thinking, maybe I can talk to this guy. Maybe he'll listen to me. And I start everybody with a 30-minute investigation call, which is basically just me doing my recruiter thing, saying, tell me what's going on. Tell me what's in your way. Tell me what struggles. Tell me what you've tried. What are your thoughts on this, that, and the other thing? Okay, based on that, I can get, in 5 minutes, I can get to where most people can't get to in about an hour, just because I've been doing it my whole life. And it's not offensive, it's not invasive, it's confidential, and it's non-judgmental. And I can tell at the end of 30 minutes, this is what I think that here's where your opportunities are. And here's where I think I can impact those opportunities and how I think I can impact them. And if you'd like to understand what it looks like to work with me on a more formal basis, we can have that discussion now, or we can just wish each other well. And I got 2 things I want to leave you with that you can put into action right now to start the process of getting a little bit better. And so it's a non-invasive, non-threatening 30 minutes, and it's free. And I do that for a reason, because I need that 30 minutes to build that trust and to share the vulnerability, to make people feel comfortable that, yeah. And I have a pretty good percentage of people that say, let's talk some more. I went to confession a few years. So my name is my domain, Mark Aylward, AYLWARD. And I'm very active on LinkedIn, and my YouTube channel's full of free content that's pretty helpful for people that are looking for answers. And so I would say, if people want to find out more about me before they stroke me a check, go to my LinkedIn profile, and you can get all my other properties are linked to that. And it's pretty rich. I got like 150 articles on there, and I got 100 and something videos on YouTube. And they all speak to how to fix a problem or how to get to a better place from where you are in some capacity.
I love it. Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure to have you on.
Yeah, no, it's great. I enjoyed talking to both you guys, and maybe we'll do it again sometime soon.
Yeah, I think it'd be great. Absolutely. I think there's a lot of other things to explore too on that, even the appreciation of aging men, in our society. We forget that
Yeah.
they've lived a life and they've got a lot to teach us. So
Yeah, it's my father's perspective is on many of these topics is pretty interesting. Yeah, he's to your point about we're in a new time right now. You know, he was born when there weren't even airplanes in the sky yet. Most reasons, he ended up being a fighter pilot. So there's a lot of good stories there. But yeah, thanks again, guys. I really enjoyed it.